6, 2018 meeting of the Parker Planning Commission to order at 7 p.m. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call. Absent is Dwayne. Seated for Dwayne is Ruth Ann. Absent is Tracy. And absent is Kim. All other members present. Next, do we have any additions to or deletions from the agenda?
No, sir, we do not.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from July 12th, 2018?
No, sir.
Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the July 12, 2018 minutes.
Second.
It's been moved by John, seconded by Eric, that we approve the Planning Commission minutes from July 2018. Signify your approval by yes.
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 Okay. What?
There it is.
There we go.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing on ordinance number 3.147.6, a bill for an ordinance to amend section 13.02.010, 13.06.070, and 13.07.03 over the Parker Municipal Code concerning residential roadway buffering standards. We will open the public hearing at 7:02. All right, Carol?
Good evening, Commissioners and Chair. Tonight we will be considering amendments to 3 sections of the Land Development Ordinance Code concerning residential roadway buffers. Section 1302.010 is the definitions section, where a definition will be added for residential roadway buffers. The other 2 sections are amendments to the landscape and design standards, and will add requirements for buffer widths and landscaping. This amendment will require applicants for new single-family detached and attached residential development to incorporate a landscape buffer between the back or side of residential lots and adjacent arterial and collector roadways. These photos represent the do's being proposed and are attractive additions to the public realm. And these are the don'ts. Fence canyons and inadequate buffers. The town of Parker has experienced substantial growth and development over the past few years, including single-family housing. Much of this residential development has occurred on challenging infill sites in master plan communities. The design quality of these projects has become a concern because new residential development is being squeezed into smaller lots and pushed closer to major roads in response to economic pressures such as increased land and construction costs. In response to these concerns, the town has identified the problem of inadequate buffers between residential lots and major roads as an issue to be addressed. The town's land development ordinance currently lacks any standards that address the requirement for and design of residential roadway buffers. The Community Development Department has spent the better part of 2 years analyzing the issue, consulting with residential developers, preparing the standards, and testing them to ensure technical feasibility. The new standard will ensure an appropriate buffer and prevent the creation of fence canyons along arterial and collector roadways. The standards will also mitigate nuisance impacts, such as noise, promote a desirable visual environment along public right-of-ways, and preserve community character. Development of this amendment has been a collaborative effort and has spanned, as I said, nearly 2 years. Staff completed the draft of the original residential roadway buffer standards in February of 2017, with a requirement for a minimum buffer equal to 1/2 of the right-of-way width on each side of a major road. The development community represented by the Development Liaison Committee, met with staff regarding potential impacts on total lot yield, water costs and ongoing landscaping maintenance for homeowners associations, and also a need for flexibility to accommodate site-specific constraints and design creativity. Based on these conversations, town staff consulted with landscape, architecture, and planning firm, as well as an irrigation specialist, to analyze the concerns and revise the proposed amendment accordingly. As a result, the proposed residential roadway buffer amendment addresses the development community concerns while still providing an attractive and effective buffer. A summary of those revisions follow on this and the subsequent slide. The proposed buffer widths have been revised to reduce the minimum buffer width to better reflect the built condition in town, which includes established residential neighborhoods such as Canterbury Crossing, Clark Farms, and Stroh Ranch. The revised buffers are approximately half of those originally proposed. Landscape requirements in the buffer area have been revised to encourage a linear design that can reduce water tap fees, increase water conservation, and lower ongoing maintenance costs for homeowners associations. The proposed amendment allows for the limited reallocation of the required residential roadway buffer from one area to another within the same block, subject to the approval of the planning director. This reallocation allows for flexibility in design to respond to existing topography and other site-specific constraints. Reallocation can also result in an improved subdivision design. The Town of Parker Master Plan states that our community will continue to enhance its sense of place and pride through the refinement, development, and support of programs and policies which result in the highest possible standards of design in the built environment. Specific goals within this chapter include an emphasis on well-planned streets and walkways that maintain a safe and attractive public space. The proposed residential roadway buffer standards are consistent with these goals and with the town master plan. In conclusion, the proposed buffer widths are reflective of the existing high-quality subdivisions already in our community. They provide for flexibility in subdivision design to respond to topography, parcel shape, and other constraints. And finally, updated landscape regulations allow for flexibility in design within these buffer areas that may reduce water and long-term maintenance-related costs, while still providing screening and visual buffering. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend that Town Council approve Ordinance 3.147.6 concerning residential roadway buffering standards. That concludes staff's report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Carolyn?
Carolyn, how does this go into effect? Do we have some communities that are already grandfathered or not grandfathered that have been approved?
This would only apply to new development. Anything that's already either constructed or in the pipeline would be based on the regulations that were in place at the time they did that.
Thank you.
Carolyn, what about new developments that are adding on or growing and they're having to do a separate filing, or do they?
Right. So when a subdivision has a new filing, that would be considered new development, and yes, these regulations would apply.
Okay, thank you.
Carolyn, when you say on the diagrams it said tree lawn, is that truly turf grass lawn, or is that?
So are we talking about this slide here?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it could be. This is just a rendition, right? And this is what we based our analysis on to develop some calculations on water use. It doesn't have to be turf grass, but it can't be natural native grass right against the sidewalk. It can be native grass. That second band on that
Sure.
drawing is actually native grass.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
One other question on the landscaping, Carolyn, is that tree lawn going to be wide enough in our new guidelines to support trees?
So this doesn't change the street. That's called the streetscape. So from the back of sidewalk to the curb is the streetscape, and it's governed by the streetscape regulations. These regulations won't affect that. They only pertain to from the back of the sidewalk going the other direction to the private property line.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions?
No.
Okay. As this is a public hearing, we will open the discussion to public comment on this particular item before us now. If you have a comment to make on this, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. We will open the public comment. Seeing none, we will close the public comment. Do we need further information from staff or applicant? No. Okay, then we will close the public hearing at 7:11. Planning Commission discussion.
I think this is pretty straightforward, and it will help in the visual impact, as Carolyn mentioned in her presentation, to take away from street canyons and give us a softening of from the street to the neighborhood. So I'm very much in favor of it.
I think it's great, and I think it's certainly, I think to a degree past due, so thank you.
I appreciate the responsiveness to the HOAs and their attempt to try to keep their costs down and taking care of the watering and to reduce the need for water in the landscaping area. So that's good work.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. It's going to really enhance the experience of pedestrians, of the homeowners, even drivers who are driving by visually. So this is a great addition.
Yeah, I think the recommended buffers are well overdue, and the result will be an improved design for the subdivisions, and I think it meets the 2035 master plan.
You have nothing to add. I also support.
I would agree with my fellow commissioners here. So do we have a motion?
I move the Planning Commission recommend Town Council approve ordinance number 3.147.6 to amend sections 13.02.010, comma, 13.06, .970 and 1307.030 of the Parker Municipal Code concerning residential roadway buffering standards.
I'll second.
It's been moved by John, seconded by Rich, that Planning Commission recommend Town Council approve ordinance number 3.147.6. All those in favor signify by yes.
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 Motion carries. Next item.
Thank
on
you,
our-
Commissioners.
Next item is item B, which is an ordinance number 1.514. It is a bill for an ordinance vacating a portion of the Sunway located within the plat of Parker Square Tract C1. And we will open the public hearing at 7:13. Stacy?
Good evening, Chairman and Planning Commission members. So the intent of this application is to vacate a portion of Sunway right-of-way. So this application is before you tonight because a portion of the right-of-way has been constructed, and per the Town of Parker Land Development Ordinance, a vacation of a constructed right-of-way requires a public hearing before both the Planning Commission and Town Council. In addition, it requires public notice. All public notice requirements have been satisfied for this application. So Sunway is a short, non-residential local road that runs from Parker Square Drive in the north and terminates in a dead end south of Solar Circle. When the property to the south developed for multifamily, Sunway was not needed for access. The town has no plans to extend or improve Sunway, as this portion of Sunway is not important to the public street network or local circulation and safety. The vacated portion of right-of-way will allow for a feasible development of the adjacent property. There are currently several applications that are being processed on the lot adjacent to the proposed vacation. These applications include a proposed rezoning from commercial to the Greater Downtown Market Center, which the Planning Commission heard on July 12, 2018 and recommended approval. That'll go to Town Council on August 6, 2018. In addition, there's a replat to combine the proposed vacated Sunway right-of-way with the tract C1, as well as a site plan to allow for the construction of a 4,718 square foot restaurant on the property. The Department of Engineering and Public Works has reviewed the vacation request and is supportive, subject to Town Council approval. The right-of-way that is vacated will ultimately be incorporated into the site plan for the proposed restaurant. If approved by Town Council, the vacancy ordinance will take effect when the town receives payment of purchase for the vacated right-of-way from the developer. So therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend that Town Council approve ordinance number 1.514 to vacate a portion of Sun Way. This concludes my staff report. I'm available for any questions. In addition, the applicant is here tonight and can answer any questions you may have for him as well. That is it.
Okay, questions for Stacy?
Go ahead.
No, I don't.
One quick question. Will the parking lot for the new facility and the multifamily housing behind it, will there be ingress and egress through those two lots or two paved areas?
Yes.
know?
So the picture where you can actually see the construction of the multifamily housing up there. So right where this road will dead end is Solar Circle. And Solar Circle actually continues west into the multifamily residential, provides an access there. And then south of this, where the vacated right-of-way will also be an access and parking for the future restaurant.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
None for me.
Questions for the applicant? No. Okay.
Nope.
As this is a public hearing, we will open the discussion to public comment on this particular item. If you have a comment on this item before us, please step forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record. We will open public comment. Seeing none, we will close public comment. We need any further information?
No.
No?
Okay. Then we will close the public hearing at 7:17. Commissioner discussion?
Looks pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, I think
My-
it makes sense.
Yeah, my only concern had been ingress and egress with emergency access and, public safety access, and that appears not to be an issue, so I'm in support.
Yeah, it seems beneficial to the town and to the landowner, so this is good.
Yeah, I'm in agreement for the town to vacate this right-of-way to improve the access and parking for future commercial development there.
I agree with my fellow commissioners. I think it's pretty clean.
I would agree as well. Do we have a motion?
I move the Planning Commission recommend the town council approve the Sunway right-of-way vacation.
Second?
It's been moved by Rich, seconded by Eric, that, just let me get to my motion here so I have it correct in front of me, that the Plan Commission recommend town council approve the ordinance number 1.514. All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Next item. Item C. While Paul moves into the big chair.
I believe it's affectionately called the hot seat, Chair.
All right, our next item before us is a public hearing on the Parker Point zoning. And we will open the public hearing at 7:19.
Good evening once again, Mr. Chair and members of Planning Commission. As was just stated, the next hearing before you this evening is case Z17-009. It is a request for zoning for a piece of property commonly referred to as the Parker Point zoning. Please note that the applicant has provided the required notification details indicating that the hearing this evening has been legally noticed. Subject property for the request this evening is located at the southeast corner of Parker Road and Stroh Road. It is about 14 acres in size. It is currently located in unincorporated Douglas County with an agricultural 1 zoning designation. Currently on the site, there is an existing single-family home on the northern portion of the site with a variety of accessory structures on the kind of the center of the site. As further context, to the south of the subject property is Kinney Creek. To the east of the subject property is the Colorado Golf Club. To the north of the property is Stroh Road and unimproved commercial pad sites. To the northwest of the subject property is improved commercial pad sites, including a King Soopers development. And then on the west side of Parker Road is a mix of improved and unimproved commercial pad sites. The applicant has submitted the zoning request this evening in connection with a request for annexation of the subject property. The town's municipal code requires that with any annexation application that there be an associated zoning application, which is what brings us here this evening. Planning Commission does not hear or take action on the associated annexation case, but the zoning Planning Commission has the authority to make a recommendation, which is what brings us here this evening. In addition to the annexation and zoning application, the applicant has also submitted a minor development plat application, which will come before Planning Commission at a future Planning Commission hearing date for consideration. The town's master plan in this area identifies this entire intersection as a community center. The community center is identified with the large red circle. Again, the subject property located within that large red circle, roughly 14 acres. The community center within the town's master plan identifies appropriate uses being retail, as well as personal and business services, offices, recreational uses, restaurants. It's really intended to serve a larger trade area and multiple neighborhoods. The modified commercial that's been submitted by the applicant is consistent with that intent. The image on the slide before you shows the applicant's zoning map. The area on the right-hand side of the image, which is the south side of the property, is proposed to be zoned with open space in order to accommodate floodplain and a Preble's jumping mouse habitat. So open space would not allow for the development of that property. It would remain open space. The remainder of the site, the northern portion of the site, is requested to be a modified commercial. What that really means is that the town's standard, or what we refer to as a Euclidean zone district of C commercial, would be the underlying zone district where the allowed uses such as restaurants and commercial services, retail services, things of that nature are allowed, with some modifications. There would be modifications essentially in two areas. Although one of those areas would be in the allowed uses, although not allowed on this property. The property owner wanted to ensure that things like marijuana uses or sexually oriented businesses, auto sales, and standalone bars would not be allowed on the subject property, so those uses would be prohibited, which is part of the modification. The other modification would be related to setbacks. So the traditional C commercial setbacks would apply. In addition to that, there would be a maximum setback from Parker Road of 65 feet, as well as a maximum setback from Stroh Road of 80 feet. The area in the purple box on kind of in the extreme northwest corner is further requested to be modified to prohibit uses related to car washes, gas stations, and restaurants would not be allowed on that hard corner of the property. In reviewing a zoning request, the land development ordinance outlines 9 specific approval criteria for a rezoning. All 9 of those criteria have been detailed in the staff report that was presented to Planning Commission. For brevity purposes, this evening staff has identified the first 2 zoning approval criteria for further discussion. The first is that a need exists for the proposal. Again, per the town's municipal code, anytime there's an annexation application, there is a requirement to have a zoning application. So there is a need for the proposal. And then again, that the second approval criteria is that the property is indeed the correct site for the proposed development. Again, the town's master plan calls this area out, this entire intersection, as a community center. The applicant is proposing a modified commercial zoning designation that would provide those commercial services that are influenced by the town's master plan. With that, staff recommends that Planning Commission recommend that Town Council approve this request for modified commercial and open space zoning for the property at the southeast corner of Parker Road and Stroh Road. And that would conclude staff's presentation. However, staff is certainly available for any questions you all may have.
Questions for Paul?
Paul, that 80-foot to the north, is a portion of that going to be allocated for future widening of Stroh through that area?
As part of the future minor development plat that you all will hear, there is a dedication requirement along Stroh Road for additional right-of-way. The setback requirement would be measured from that new right-of-way to any future structure.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Paul?
I had a couple of questions about the open space and the tree replacement. How was the line for where the open space versus the modified commercial zone, how was that line determined?
That is determined to align with the surveyed and documented boundaries of the floodplain and the mouse habitat. So again, in coordination with the minor development plat, the applicant, through their survey team, went through and surveyed those points and those legal descriptions. And that's how the boundaries were determined, both for the plat and for the zoning application.
Then my other question was, the cottonwood trees that are going to be removed, they're proposing replacing those with ponderosa pine. I was just wondering why they weren't replacing them with like for like.
With a cottonwood? The town's approved landscape manual does not allow for the planting of new cottonwood trees.
Okay. I knew there was a good reason. I just wanted to know what it was.
And just to clarify that point, there are some cottonwoods that, as part of the development, will be removed, but there are a significant number of them along Kinney Creek and along that south east corner that will remain and will be preserved as part of the development, just to clarify.
Okay.
Paul, did the developer, or did the applicant have a presentation or just here to answer questions?
They do not have a presentation, but they are available for any questions that Planning Commission may have.
Planning Commission have any questions for the applicant?
I do have a question. I'm curious if a PD zoning was considered, and what's the reasoning for not going with the PD? What's the advantage of the modified commercial over?
So, good question. A PD was discussed throughout the submittal process. Ultimately, the applicant property owner determined that the traditional C commercial district would meet the needs of their development with a few modifications, and those modifications are what are being discussed this evening.
Thank you.
Further questions?
No.
All right. As this is a public hearing, we will open the discussion to public comment. If you have a comment on this particular matter, please step forward to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. We will open the public comment.
I'm going to talk fast to stay within the 3 minutes. I
Okay,
guess.
thank you.
My name is Kenneth Ramsey, and I live at 3862 Elm Avenue in Parker, Colorado, 80134. Environment, water, and wildlife. What will our future be like? I have two related issues to address with you. First is the welfare of the prairie dog colony located at this property. Second is the increased water runoff and decreased groundwater recharge that will occur from the development of this property. Right now, the sponge-like condition of the soil and the prairie dog burrows at this location allow groundwater recharge to occur. After removing the prairie dogs and developing this site, groundwater recharge at this site will stop forever. New construction covers the earth, causes increased water runoff, stops groundwater recharge, and speeds water up forever. This is a net loss of available water for well water users and a net gain for surface water users. Prairie dogs are part of our wildlife heritage, and their burrows are important tools in groundwater recharge. Today, I ask that the prairie dogs' lives at this site be spared. Poisoning prairie dogs is cruel and inhumane in many ways. Poison causes tremendous pain and suffering through internal bleeding that can last for days. Killing prairie dogs is a terrible and unnecessary waste of this wildlife resource. Prairie dogs are an important and underappreciated key asset of our great American Plains heritage that we should be using to our benefit everywhere possible. We especially want prairie dog colonies where there is significant runoff occurring. Prairie dogs can be included in site plans, but if prairie dogs cannot stay where they are, then they should be relocated and protected. A last resort should be death by carbon dioxide. Poisoning of prairie dogs should be forbidden. Prairie dogs are among the least harmful and most helpful creatures on our planet. All wildlife needs food, water, and shelter. Prairie dogs are food for many other creatures. Prairie dog burrows provide shelter for many other creatures. Killing prairie dogs is taking away a food supply for other wildlife species. Remember the Colorado Non-Game and Endangered Wildlife Fund on our income tax returns? What good is that fund if we are killing their food source? Poisoning prairie dogs also poisons any creatures that eats the poisoned prairie dogs. The loss of prairie dogs means that many other wildlife species will also die off. Poisoning an entire colony of prairie dogs is a massive animal abuse event. Animal abuse is never acceptable behavior. Permitting or sanctioning animal abuse is despicable and is unacceptable. Animal abuse events are training, practice, and justification events for future atrocities against people. The greatest lesson of World War II was the definition of evil. Evil is the absence of empathy. Concerning animal abuse, there is a recent quote from United States Representative Catherine Clark, quote, "From Columbine to Parkland to Sutherland Springs, these perpetrators of mass gun violence had a history of animal abuse, and addressing this pattern of behavior is part of the solution when it comes to preventing gun violence and saving lives," unquote. Stop poisoning prairie dogs. Uncontrolled destruction of prairie dogs and of our wildlife is very bad policy with far-reaching consequences. Stop the poisoning. Protect our well waters by planning for and allowing for groundwater recharge. Yes, our prairie dogs know how.
Thanks, sir.
This is my first time doing this. I know I'm going to forget mostly everything I want to say. My name's Amanda Steinhauser. I live at 9157 Bayou Gulch Road in Parker, and down that direction. And I too am the thing that I had noticed first was the prairie dogs. I looked at them all the time, but that site, whenever there were horses there, was always a beautiful area. Since the gentleman that spoke before me already talked about the prairie dogs, I did want to point out that there are nesting raptors. I believe that they have already possibly left the nest in probably one of those cottonwood trees that is going to be destroyed. And those trees are very valuable, historically very valuable. But getting back to the history of that site, I looked at the assessment online, and I didn't see anything about the William Cantrell, who is the person who developed that site first, and the Allison family, and then the O'Brien family. And if you're familiar with Douglas County history, William Cantrell is the one who built the first courthouse in Douglas County, and he used wood from that site. And he had a sawmill on that site, and he built the first courthouse that was in Castle Rock out of lumber from that site. Then he ended up selling that sawmill to the Allison family, and then they ended up developing a sophisticated water system that they found had medicinal qualities, and they created a hot springs. And they ended up building a hotel, an 8-room hotel, and it was a retreat for people with tuberculosis. And that ran for years, and I guess it was so successful that they built another house, and those are the twin houses. The one is still there. It became a barn later, and the other one was moved up north. It's a historical site. So that was one of the twin houses. It's still there. It's been salvaged. It's been picked apart. There are a lot of those outbuildings were the original. Those are historical sites. And I mean, it's so important to preserve our history here. And I wasn't even born and raised here, and I know how valuable it is. And to me, it's almost like a sin to put a shopping center there, because I think that's like the last thing we need. And I really think that the wildlife needs to be preserved. I feel like if they're going to create open space, that they should maybe give more, and not just that little portion, because the Preble mouse is an endangered species. So they had, in order to develop that site, I believe that there had to be some sort of open space created. So I just encourage you to look up the history. That all came from the Douglas County Historical Society or the Parker Historical Society. And there was a woman who lived here named Josephine Lau Mar, and she's the one that wrote a book. She passed away in 1993 on Douglas County history. So, I mean, there's no mention of the historical significance of that site.
Thank you, ma'am. Seeing no further comment, we will close the
Wait.
public, oh, sorry. We won't.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Jillian Bernoski. I live at 17525 Wild Avenue. I wasn't planning to speak today until I saw exactly what was going to be built in that spot. I know that there's been a traffic survey. I'm very unconvinced. Parker is growing so quickly. Traffic's already a nightmare. That's a busy intersection. It's going to explode. You're not going to be able to get through there. There's no way. Also, I also really like looking at the prairie dogs. I think they're cute. I moved to Colorado 2 years ago, and I'm one of the transplants who wishes everyone else would just leave because it's so amazing here. I know. I mean, that is what makes Colorado great, is having open spaces. And Parker especially is not Denver, where you're just stuck in a parking lot of cars on I-25. Parker is amazing and beautiful, and that intersection is honestly, I think, really important just overall. I know there's a lot of development, and there's only so much that can be done about that, but it's already a busy intersection, and of all the development that is going to be done, I really don't think that this is one that is worth it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda Wilson. My address is 11443 Regency Court, Parker, 80138. I wasn't planning on talking either, but after listening to these people, I agree with the wildlife situation. The prairie dogs should stay. They've been wiped out in so many places in Parker. The developer should work with Prairie Protection or some agency that is pro-prairie dogs and try and find a humane solution to the problem. I'm sorry about my voice. I'm
That's
losing
okay.
it.
Thank you. Now we will close the public comment. Do we have any further questions for staff?
No.
I was wondering if, I don't think that, these concerns that were brought up are important, but the one that I wanted to ask you about was groundwater concerns. When would that be addressed? At what point in the process is that addressed?
So as part of the, again, the minor development plat, the applicant has done a master drainage study, and our public works engineer colleagues have reviewed that for compliance with town standards. As part of the development, there will be a master drainage pond for water release and then release of historic rates. So the details of that are accommodated with the minor development plat, but do be assured that that information has been submitted, is being reviewed, and will be required to meet the town standards for drainage.
Thank you.
Paul, as I think we discussed a month ago, maybe, the town has a specific, is it an ordinance or regarding prairie dog relocation removal that all, if this property was to be annexed?
Sure. The town follows the state requirements. There is no local ordinance for the protection or mitigation for prairie dogs. They are not an endangered or protected species, so the developer is required to follow the state requirements for prairie dogs.
And if someone wanted to change that at some point, they would need to either go to council or whatever to have a
Sure,
change.
it would take a legislative action either at a local level or at a state level to change those requirements. That's correct.
Okay. All right. Any further questions for staff?
Yeah, I do have a question on the traffic, since that was mentioned. What are the traffic counts for this intersection and the level of service?
To start, it is an intersection for an arterial and a collector street, so the traffic counts are very high. With recent development in the area and in the intersection, there has been dedication for right-of-way required in order to accommodate for the traffic levels that have been identified and anticipated with the traffic impact studies.
Well, we hit on everything else, so let's just bring up the history too. Are there any, since this property has not been part of Parker, Parker's had no ability to do any kind of historical, well, what do you say?
Preservation?
Yeah, thank you. Preservation. So there's been no historical preservation opportunities even available to Parker. Do we have a historical preservation rules in Parker or legislation in Parker? And at what point would that come into play after the property actually becomes part of Parker?
So the shortest answer to that is that yes, the town does have has a historic preservation ordinance. Within that ordinance, there are still provisions for relocation, demolition, removal of resources. To your point, Commissioner, the property is not currently within the town limits, so the town cannot legally designate it with a town historic designation. With that said, understanding that there are structures on that site that are relatively old and may have a historic value, staff did require and request that the applicant provide a historic survey analysis as part of the requests. That has been provided by an independent professional who does those historic preservation analysis in order to document those structures that are there for the history.
Okay, thank you.
Is that study available for public review?
It is. It's currently available on the town's Trackit system, which is the system the town uses for all land use applications.
Okay.
Further questions? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing at 7:42. Commissioner discussion?
This is a relatively straightforward zoning request. It meets the 9 criteria, and it's only a zoning. It's not going any farther than that. And that's, I'll support the zoning request because we're in that category, and that's as far as we are authorized to go.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It meets all the 9 criteria for the rezoning. I think the modified commercial is appropriate for the area. I support having that separate open space area as well, so I think it's pretty straightforward.
I think with the proposed and approved residential housing going in west of Motzenbacher between Hess and Stroh Road, there is a need for more commercial development in that area. So I think it's looking to the future to get that ready for those housing or residential homes that are going in that area. So I'll support the zoning for this commercial or rezoning for this commercial lot.
I agree. Whenever property is brought into Parker, we have to zone it. And this is and the zoning has to be something that's going to be useful to Parker and Parker's residents. It has to be something that's respectful to the owner of the property, who has an investment in what they're going to do with it and how they're going to develop it. I think that the concerns that were brought up tonight are valid concerns, and they're being addressed in the various ways that were discussed by staff after the public comment. And I appreciate the fact that staff went into requiring a historical report that people can access online through Trackit. The traffic concerns are ubiquitous now in Parker, and I understand that, when we're dealing with the collector and arterial roads, and there has been accommodation made in the discussion that they talked about how they're going to have to end up widening, and they've made arrangements for that already. So I think that we are ahead of the curve on this. It meets the 9 criteria, and I am in support of the zoning.
And I think the zoning is consistent with the other corners at that spot, so I'm in support.
I would agree that the zoning fits the master plan and meets the 9 criteria, and I'm in support of it as well. Do we have a motion?
I move Planning Commission recommend Town Council approve the zoning request.
It's been moved by Gianna, seconded by John, that Planning Commission recommend Town Council approve the zoning request. Signify your approval by yes.
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 Okay, thank you. Other staff items, Rosemary, Paul? All right.
No, sir.
Then we will adjourn at 7:45.